Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Charles Ayitey. Charles, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Allow me to introduce Charles. He works and lives in Accra, Ghana. So bear with us because the internet connection is not always working correctly. So let's hope that it will stay stable. He's educated as a journalist and has been working as a business journalist his whole professional life. And he hosts the most watched business program, The Marketplace. And he currently also works as a journalist covering impactful business stories, has a passion for youth enterprise development, and has already received a couple of honors as a journalist. And Charles is also a poet, which we'll cover in this program. So again, Charles, welcome you to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Fritz.
Now, Charles, we met through Voices for Peace, when actually the roles were reversed. You interviewed me, which we'll cover later in that interview. Could you please tell us a little bit about what Voices for Peace is and your role as a journalist there?
Well, so basically, Voice for Peace is much more of an advocacy group that bases its advocacy on data. And currently, what you're doing in Ghana and across the African continent is helping us understand how data is instrumental to our democracy. And so, for example, we just had our elections, that was in 2020. And out of this election, there are so many issues that came out of the election. First of all, the kind of confidence that voters had in the election results, which of course we did see bouts of violence here and there, and how data could have solved this situation. And so when I was approached by Voices for Peace about the need for them to get their message out there as a journalist and a broadcaster, I was so enthused to bring them on board, where I created synergies between themselves and the business community here in Ghana, as well as my audience in Accra and around the world, to get to appreciate the import of their messaging and how best this could help us, not just in elections, but in each and every angle of our economic makeup. Because data is everything, first. Data is what could inform development partners to say we're investing in that angle and we're not investing in that angle. So Voices for Peace is indeed an instrument for change and a pivot for development. And I'm absolutely honored to be a part of it through what I do as a journalist and the platform I'm offering them to share the information.
Okay. Now, as a journalist, you often are required to remain impartial, neutral. Yeah. So how do you compare being a journalist also when you present the most well-watched business program with this role, which is a little bit more activist?
Well, one thing that guards my conscience as a journalist within what I do is that I would have to be factual and not partial. Factual and neutral. Partiality does not matter. So if my facts and my neutrality shifts me to a particular point of, argument for whichever party, so long as it's factual and neutral, I have no qualms about that. So, because when you're partial, it means that you have leanings to a particular, form of argument or a group of people. But when you're neutral as a journalist, it means you're going with the facts, you're going with the situation on the ground. You are really speaking to both sides of the coin, and you're getting the balance when it comes to the messaging that you're churning out for your audience. So indeed, as a business journalist, I deal so much with the business community. I deal so much with development agencies, diplomatic, communities and whatnot. Oftentimes, the story might not go in their favor. Oftentimes, they may feel very much threatened by whichever news angle, but it is my facts, the facts I present to them, and the neutrality of these facts that help them understand the fact that we're wrong and this is what the news says. So we have to deal with it and we have to work our way out. So this has been my guiding conscience as a journalist, and this continues to be a pivot of my career as well, not just for me, but other colleagues of mine in Ghana and across the continent, because partiality is subjective. But when it comes to being neutral and having to go with facts, there are no compromises along with that.
Great answer. Now, I fully understand where you're coming from, and also the link to Voices for Peace, which talks about data. So I got that. Now, I also know that because I follow you on LinkedIn, that you spend a lot of time promoting the young entrepreneurs around Ghana and Africa as a whole. And there's some amazing people and stories to share there. So who do you see as your audience when you share those stories?
I consider three groups of people as my audience. First of all, those in the diaspora, Africans in the diaspora. I consider prospective investors as my audience. And I also consider young African entrepreneurs as my audience. So these are the kind of three people that I reach out to on my LinkedIn page. See, we have so many entrepreneurs in Africa, in Ghana, doing amazing stuff. Unfortunately, they do not have the platform, the needed international platform to bring them on that level where they could interconnect with prospective clients, prospective investors, and even the diaspora, colleague entrepreneurs in the diaspora from their home country who could help them. So I thought to myself that why don't I use my LinkedIn profile as that channel for change development for African entrepreneurs. And the success stories I'm so proud of. So recently, there was this one I did about a gentleman who was using waste for bricks in Ghana. And this particular link did so well to the extent that as we speak, we've had some international company call him up through me, call him up for an interview for prospective investment flow. So they're going to be funding his project. How amazing is that? So these and many other interventions on my LinkedIn page do I consider heartwarming, with the kind of stuff I'm doing and the kind of, content that I'm churning out there. It's not just for my platform, it's for, entrepreneurs in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Uganda, in Egypt, bringing them all together and showcasing what they're doing to attract the needed investment and funding they need to expand. It matters so much to me.
Oh, that's such a good way to support indeed those entrepreneurs. So I get where you're coming from. So how do you define then your own success in this context, in this situation?
Well, I define my success. In fact, I link my success with their success. So with whatever thing that as a journalist, I'm very much eager to know what the result will be. And one thing I have been using is the STAR approach. So what happens is that I identify the situation, the fact that most entrepreneurs do not really have the platform, and even if they do, maximizing the platform. Then I put myself to the task of having to help them out. So what do I do? Not just on LinkedIn, but I invite most of them to my programs on the marketplace where they could have a much larger audience. And when I get that particular, task done, of course, the action must follow. So we have, off the camera engagement with prospective clients, development partners, on how best they could help through, forums, workshops, Zoom interviews, where they could interface with most of these people off the camera, off LinkedIn. And the results, amazing. We keep getting amazing results of where these guys are being given funds to expand, and they are, given particular information on how to remain competitive in their own field. So it's rewarding. For me, it is this particular results that I get that measures my success as a journalist.
Okay. When you measure it, this is, I would say, a qualitative aspect. Can you put some numbers on it? How big of an audience can you reach out to now?
Well, so currently the marketplace on Joy News, which is a channel in Ghana that's the multi-TV Joy News, reaches close to 1.2 million audience, not just in Ghana. We're talking of, the SAP region and abroad. Remember that it's not a traditional television station. We're also on social media. The programs I host are live on, Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube. So if you combine all the audience there, together with our reach in Africa, we're looking close to 1.2 million views, audience share in a day, just a day. That's in a month, yes.
Good numbers. Now, this is where you use your role as a journalist to promote entrepreneurship, show what's actually possible. I also see that you use your role as a journalist to stop and ban things. You actually got an award for writing an article on the ban of sale of skin bleaching products.
Indeed.
Could you please take the audience along? Why did you want to write that piece?
Well, so skin bleaching is a canker of a sort in African countries, not just Ghana. And based on our culture and the indoctrination, of foreign movement, we're having so many young people, ladies, men, wanting to look white, just because of the screens and how the stars or mentors on television look. And so it has got so bad to the extent that Food and Drugs Authority has even raised concerns on, the health of these people. We have the high case of skin cancer in Ghana, and of course that's of Nigeria and some of Africa. And so all these challenges informed my decision to write an extensive article featuring Ghana's leading local boxer, who is called Bukum Bankum, who recently offered to bleach his skin. And, with the large following that he has, you could imagine the impact his decision took on his followers and his supporters across the beachfronts in Accra, Ghana. And so when I wrote that particular article, it attracted the concern of the BBC World News Service. They were very much interested in getting to know what exactly is informing people to bleach their skin and how detrimental is this, not just to their health, but to the entire economy of Ghana. Because as we speak now, the import of bleached skin products in Ghana, hit close to a million cedis just in 2019. We do not know the details because, as we speak, because of COVID-19 and its disruption of global chains. But before COVID hits, the amount of money that entered into the imports of skin bleaching cosmetic materials were amazingly close to 1 million Ghana cedis. And so, yes, this article really informed what was going on and also warned about the implications in the future, of which got the attention of the BBC World News Service and continues to attract so many awards each and every time.
Well, congratulations there with getting that award and that recognition. At the end of the day, you probably wrote that article not for the reward, but actually to change it. And have you seen a change taking place? Do people react?
Indeed, currently there is regulation from the Food and Drugs Authority. Currently, all cosmetic products which contain the cancer-causing elements, that often is being used as bleach from Ghana. So you cannot really import such items into the country. We're witnessing a high-level surveillance at our ports and our land borders as well, because most of these products are being smuggled, from land borders, from neighboring countries, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, that of Togo. So the surveillance has increased, is beefed up, and public awareness has also increased alongside, not just on my network, but across various networks through the efforts of the Food and Drugs Authority. So indeed, I can measure some success that have happened since. We've even had the arrest of Bukumbanku because of what he was doing, bleaching his skin and propagating the need to bleach their skins. And he's also thankfully been engaged in some reorientation by the Food and Drugs Authority, where he recently had a new campaign going on against skin bleaching. So indeed, the efforts have been very much amazing, and the results outstanding. If you measure what is happening now as compared to what was happening then.
Okay. Now, how did you select this topic, or did somebody put you on this topic? Why did you pick it up? Why did you write about this?
Well, so this was when I was with Face to Face Africa, one of the most read, African, magazines on the continent. And what happens is that we would always have to tell stories about Africa to change the narrative. But I thought to myself that aside telling stories that, make people smile, it's also important for us to expose the wrongs within our continent that really is killing people. So having to measure the impact of skin bleaching, and especially how damaging it was and how it was being propagated by a large, an influencer of a boxer who had a large following, I thought to myself, now was the time for me to have this article done and avail myself for various interviews to explain and also detail the extent to which this activity and this cross-border trade in this huge cosmetic market was having a toll on the lives and livelihoods of people in my country.
Okay, because I know that you strongly believe in personal accountability and holding business community accountable. And this is an example. Is your approach writing about it? Are there other things you do to make and hold people and organizations accountable?
Indeed, and that's what encapsulates my duty as a journalist, having to hold the business community indeed accountable. I could talk about a situation where in 2019, I had to reveal the extent to which a steel manufacturing company, within the free zones board of my country, Ghana, was polluting the environment. I detailed in an investigative piece the extent to which workers within the steel manufacturing company were losing their lives and just couldn't complain because, yes, their bosses, were the ones that were taking care of their family, they're losing their job. So they kept this themselves. But out of this investigative piece that I did, out of the revelation that I made regarding the impact, not just on the lives of the workers, but the lives of the residents around most of these steel manufacturing companies, we had our Ministry for Science and Technology step in. We had authorities, close to being arrested because it was much more heading towards a criminal activity. Air pollution of any sort is criminal, especially when we're having cases here in Ghana where climate change is much more of a challenge. And so for governments to understand the impact that the emissions that most of these manufacturing companies were, releasing into the environment, that was beyond the limit that our Environmental Protection Agency has spelled out. They had to act, and indeed they did act, and we continue to see some improvement along those lines. So this is just one aspect of accountability that I have, been able to churn in my news, outlet, and most of them are often interview-based. And some of them are based on investigative features and pieces that I put together. Out of this particular piece that I did regarding the steel manufacturing company polluting the environment, we had the Ministry of Science and Technology. That's a ministry that takes care of our environment, basically. Step in with the police, the Ghana Police Service, to shut down the steel manufacturing company, to put to account the various officials within these companies to explain what exactly was going on. And we had most of these workers compensated as well because their health was in dire need, for medical assistance. So, this particular aspect that I am telling you about is just a piece of the various stories and, in-studio interventions, interviews, and news articles that I often do to put businesses on their feet.
Got that. Now, a number of times in this program, I move to a slightly different topic now. we ask people what are the milestones or the career highlights so far. And what I found quite amazing when you shared with me your profile, except one, you identified that all your career highlights were last year in the year 2021. So last year was actually a breakthrough year for you. What happened that you had so many milestones there?
COVID. Last year we had the impact of COVID-19 around the world. And out of this impact, there was an opportunity as well for me as a journalist to tell the stories of those who were suffering. And at the forefront of COVID-19 was entrepreneurs. So a major challenge that I was able to, discover was that out of COVID-19, supply chains had been disrupted. Businesses could not import to the various countries. And it was so much of a stalemate when it comes to, importing, exporting, not just around the world, but specifically in Ghana and the rest of Africa. And so I thought to myself the need to bring on board business associations, those that really matter when it comes to pulling the string of, doing business in Ghana. And out of this, we held, massive workshops, massive, national policy dialogues on how best to, grant stimulus to the entrepreneurial, industry in my country. So if you could go through the highlights, you realize that I moderated most of these programs. I told most of these stories. And out of that, thankfully, I was even, selected to join, a few journalists around the continent to, Montpellier, France, where there was an international reawakening for entrepreneurship in Africa and around the world amid COVID-19. So it was indeed a highlight for my career, especially when it helped me appreciate the impact of COVID on entrepreneurship. When we're talking of entrepreneurs, they are, the backbone to the African economy. We're talking of 80% of SMEs, SMEs employing 80% of the population, not just in Ghana, but the rest of Africa. So whenever the informal sector making up the SMEs and entrepreneurs is hit by any tragedy, we have economies in Ghana and the rest of Africa, have to face a challenge. So indeed, we cannot joke with entrepreneurs, and they continue to remain, a fulcrum to my journalistic journey.
Okay, so COVID has brought you that recognition, which is good, but also highlighted how important entrepreneurs are and the impact of COVID. So well done for you to share those stories. Now, so far we've talked about your brand as being a journalist, but there's also something else which I shared in my introduction. You also write poems.
Indeed.
And I get the impression you do not only write those poems for yourself because you post them online.
Yes.
And could you tell a little me? Okay, I'll share with you the three titles which triggered me. And I also see a common element: addiction, I want to be free. When tomorrow fades away. When Christmas shines, the pain of my time. Now, intriguing titles, but I also see like a dark side in all those titles.
Yes. Indeed.
Why is that? What do you want to do with your poetry?
Yes. Poetry is an intimate way of having a conversation with your inner self and the untold, also revealing the untold nature of a society. That's what poetry is all about. And for me as a journalist, I see poetry as that shelf, that I crawl into to reflect over my life, and as well to really understand things happening around me. I use poetry to do that a lot. So if you go through most of the that I posted online, they may be dark, but I do not see them as dark enough. I see them as, much more revealing of the environments that not just me finding myself in, but so many young adults, in my generation find themselves in. You talk of addiction. Currently we're having so much addiction when it comes to the internet. We're having so much addiction when it comes to self-love. We're having so much addiction when it comes to being a narcissist because of the way our environment has, shaped us to be. I could stay indoors for years without having to knock on the door of a neighbor to say, how are you doing? And all these things are ingrained in some subtle, addiction to a specific idea, a character, or a make-believe system that I thought I could share in this particular poem. I must add, though, that this poem was written when I was just 19 years of age. So that was close to about over 10 years ago. I'll be turning 30 soon. So it really spoke to the challenges that I faced as a teenager, having to grow up in a world where, I've been addicted to, the Internet of Things. It's created this sense of individualism, not having to open up to society, but close yourself up and just enjoy things around you. Yes.
Okay, well, it's quite an impressive poem for somebody who's 18. So well done there. And when you write your poetry, when you work as a journalist, where do you draw your inspiration from?
I draw my inspiration from the fact that it's a calling. That's where I draw my inspiration. I have always wanted to do this, and having to get the opportunity to do it is for me a blessing. And the best way by which I could reward that blessing is to give up my best. And so as a journalist, I am really, feeding into this blessing called an opportunity to serve my community. And I do that all the time. I never get tired. So indeed, it's a calling for me and an inspiration in that particular sense. I do not see journalism as a cash cow to become rich overnight or rich in a span of time. I see that as an experience that could expose me as a platform for people who do not have the voice, and just to see them thrive, from the platform I offer them is rewarding enough. There is nothing more I could ask for.
I got that. So we've covered yourself as a journalist, an activist, as a poet. How do you want the world to remember you?
I want the world to remember as the journalist who really, really put entrepreneurs on the world stage. I know the fact that we have international brands doing some things regarding entrepreneurships, and I acknowledge the fact that they're doing massively well. But the issue is that this is a platform that I'm offering those without voices, those who do not have the capacity to get on CNN, to get on Al Jazeera, doing massively well in changing the narratives in their respective communities. I wake up each and every day to hundreds of messages on LinkedIn and even my my Gmail account begging me to tell these stories. And though overwhelmed, I remain. I'm also absolutely confident the fact that yes, they find confidence in what I'm doing, and so I need to give back that confidence by featuring them on the platforms. So I really want the world to really remember me for this, and I believe they will, because of the results we continue to see, not just on LinkedIn, but on platforms that I represent.
Okay, now Charles, you're still here, and I know that all these young managers are connecting you, as you just mentioned. Is there any, I would say, generic advice you can give that young generation of startups and of entrepreneurs so they can improve themselves?
Well, two things: they need to be fluent in the products that they produce for the society and the rest of the world. And they need to be aggressively innovative amid COVID-19. Fluid in the sense that, we're witnessing a wave of, the same kind of products each and every time. People are really not bringing out products that speak to a niche market. People are doing things that everyone is doing. And for me, that's what restricts us as entrepreneurs in Africa when the competition is so keen. So for us to pull through and to reach the global scale, it's important for us to be fluid. We need to change with the times and not be so much boxed into our ideals and our ideas as entrepreneurs. We need to be aggressively innovative. Innovation comes in a second. You cannot do the same thing doing all the time. You need to be innovative to understand that these are times that need innovation. So if hitherto I was producing shoes, how can I be innovative enough to make sure that the shoes I produce help a market that I'm targeting? So you're not just producing shoes, but you're also making advocacy for people who do not have access to shoes. You're telling stories for the need for those people to provide them with shoes. You are expanding your industrial base to also cover the need for people underprivileged in societies that you are providing to. So it's an all circle, solution that you're providing, not necessarily sticking to one angle of a product that you're selling. That for me is what can take African entrepreneurs from where they are now to that international level that they deem to be in the next few years.
Charles, that's great advice. And I really hope that the people watching this program or listening to the podcast will take it to heart. So, Charles, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with the brand called You, talking about your work as being one of the top business journalists in Ghana, and also using your voice to help entrepreneurs improve themselves. So, again, thank you so much.
Fred, it's a pleasure having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.